Okay, so it's the top of the hour according to my clock, so I'll get started. It's really nice to be here and have so many of you here today on this spotlight session about summaries. I'll just say a little bit about myself very briefly for those of you who don't know me. My name's Christina Silva. I run a project called the MAXDAYS Networking Project at the University of Surrey in Guildford in the UK. Not far from London, which is all about raising awareness and building capacity in the use of digital tools which are designed specifically for qualitative and mixed methods analysis. And I've been working with that project for almost 25 years, I think. So I've used MAXQDA for a long time, since it was called WinMax, for my own research and helping others to harness the powerful tools that it provides us. I also do my own research and training through QDA services, and you can see my contact details on the slide. As I think you know, you can post your questions in the Q&A part of the platform. I'll keep an eye on those as we go through, but there will be time for questions at the end as well. Okay, so let's see whether I can get this to go to the next slide. Yes, okay, so what are summaries? So summaries are actually one of my favorite tools in MAXQDA, and hopefully I can excite you about them as well in today's sessions. They're actually one of several writing spaces that we have available to us in the software. Others are paraphrases, which are all about annotating qualitative data with analytic notes that can then be categorized, and there's a spotlight about paraphrases later on. There's also another space which is similar called comments, and they're attached to coded segments in a similar way to summaries. But what we'll see when we talk about summaries in more detail today is that the display of summaries are quite different. We've also got memos as a writing space in MAXQDA, and you can also write inside documents. And if any of you come to another of my spotlight sessions later on this afternoon about literature reviewing, then I'll be talking about writing in documents. So summaries are one of several writing spaces, and they're similar to comments in that they're linked to coded segments, and they're similar to paraphrases in that summaries are spaces to write condensed versions of what you see within data that are meaningful in the context of your objectives. But the difference with summaries is that when you use a summary's features, you're abstracting, okay? When you're working with comments or paraphrases, you're really in the nitty-gritty of the data, so working at the level of the data, and there's lots of reasons why that's very useful, of course, but summaries are all about abstracting slightly away from the data, and there are many analytic reasons why that can be useful. So we're going to think about how we can work with coded segments and abstract and conceptualize and view them together rather than individually, as we may be doing if we're using some of the other writing spaces in the software. So in that sense, summaries are allowing us to work at a slightly more abstract level with our writings about the materials that we're seeing. Okay, so what I hope to show you today is the comparative retrieval of coded segments, how we can reduce data. Much of our analytic work when we're working with qualitative materials is reducing a large amount of qualitative materials that you have, and summaries allow you to do that via summarizing, and we'll see that we can view, display and analyze these summaries. So my focus today is going to be on showing you the features of the software and talking through how we can make use of them. But hopefully you'll start to make some connections in your own mind as we look at these tools for the different analytic purposes that you can put these summaries to inside your own projects. And I do think that there are multiple potential uses for summaries, which is one of the reasons why they're so flexible and so powerful, I think, as a MAXQDA tool. Okay, so let's just have an overview of the functions. So there are 4 key functions. Summary grids are where we summarize the coded segments in a kind of grid, a tabular display, and I'm going to share that to you very shortly. Out of those, we can generate tables. So that means that we can then display the summaries that we've created together. And we can do that alongside variables that we may have associated with our data files, our documents. Then we have another tool called the Summary Explorer, and that allows us to compare the summaries that we've made based on higher level groupings. Okay, so summary tables are focused on the document level, whereas the Explorer allows us to compare on different kinds of levels, so cases and groups, and I'll show that to you as well. And we can also generate code and document summaries out of that. So we'll think about that too. And then finally, we can generate overviews of summaries. So we can retrieve the summaries that we've created at different places within our MAXQDA project, at different levels, if you like, within the document system and the code system as well. Actually, it doesn't say that on my slide, but also at the code system level too. Okay, so that's a little bit of an overview of the functionality. So I'm going to spend the majority of the rest of the time in the software and show these to you. And as well as the handout that's been posted in the platform, the help menu is really great on the summary functions as well. So if you need additional detail about the how-to element, then do refer to the help menu. The online manual is really excellent with respect to this. Okay, so here what I've got open is actually one of the sample example projects that comes with MAXQDA. I'm in the latest version of MAXQDA here. And the summary functions are available in the first instance from the analysis main menu. So you can see up there, I've focused my attention on the analysis main menu, and we can see those three areas there. So I don't have anything activated in my project at the moment. If you're new to MAXQDA, the concept of activation in the software is a means of filtering, scoping your attention on subsets of materials, and I'll talk about that later on. But at the moment, I'm looking at everything. So I'm going to generate a summary grid of all the materials initially to show you how quick and easy that happens. So if I click on that summary grid tab at the top of my screen, it brings it up, and basically I have got three kind of panels, three areas of this display. I'll just make it slightly wider. Hopefully you can see that down the left hand side I've got all of the codes. So that's replicating exactly the code system as those codes are organized in this project, and I can collapse up and open things up in the normal way. And across the columns, I've got one column for every single document that we've got in this project at the moment. Okay, so this is a grid, a table of codes by documents. Okay, codes in the rows, documents in the columns. And hopefully you can see that there are two things going on in that grid. One is that we have got some blue squares. If we prefer circles, we can turn them into circles. Can you see that you can flick between squares and circles? That's quite cool. I quite like squares. But not all of the intersections have got a blue square or circle in them. The ones that do have got coding at that intersection. So if I just click on this one here, this is the intersection between one document, which is an interview with Selim, and this is the education code. If I click on there, then I see the coded segments, okay, that have been applied, where the code has been applied to a segment of data within that document. Whereas here for Riley, there isn't any coding for that code in Riley's document at the moment, and that's why there's no blue square there. Okay, so the blue squares allow me to access the coded segments for the different intersections. Okay, and hopefully you can see that appearing on the right hand side. Okay, the third element though, which allows us to think about the actual functionality of summaries, I'll just resize this so that you can see more easily, is that some of those blue Squares have got green around them, and that's telling me that that coded segment has been summarized. So if I click on there, I get to see the summaries. Okay, so these are summaries that you, as the analyst, as the researcher, generates themselves. You can put your cursor in to the summary and add or remove whatever you want to into that summary at any point. So I can add something here. I'll just put it on the same line. So issues relating to, pretend that I can spell, to time considerations. So you can see in this example, there are actually two coded segments from this document, Matteo, that have been coded to the education code, and they're being summarized down in this panel. Okay, and you can see hopefully that there have been summaries for lots of those intersections generated, but not all of them yet. So it would be your decision to whether all of them needed to be summarized, but we're doing this on a document level based on codes. Now, I mentioned the idea of activation earlier. Let me just close this down and show you that you can create a more focused summary grid if you want to point your attention at particular aspects of your data at the moment. So let's imagine that I'm interested in just some of my data files. So here we've got 5 interviews from respondents who are living in Berlin. So I'm just going to activate those. I can do that by right-clicking, activate documents, and that makes them go red. That's what's telling me that they're activated if you're new to that functionality. I'll do the same for a group of codes here. The quicker way is just to click on the little grey circle here, and that also activates them. So I've activated some codes and some documents, and now when I go back to my summary grid, hopefully you can see that that's a much more focused grid. The functionality that I've just been through is the same, but I've just got a much smaller table to work with. Okay, a couple of other things to say about this before I move on. One is that when you choose to see coded segments, there are various other icons up here which are useful, and you can also click on the reference down here. This is a hyperlink. Anything that's blue and underlined in MAXQDA is usually a hyperlink, and the software is incredibly interactive. So I just clicked on there, and in the background it's showing me that coded segment in its source context. So if I need to take account of what was said before or afterwards in generating my summaries, then that's always very possible. So you can hopefully see in the background that you can navigate around like that. So that's very useful. Okay, so that's the process of generating the summaries, and you're doing that on the basis of codes by documents. Okay, I'm now going to show you the next level, which is to generate tables out of this. Okay, so let's imagine that I'd finished with this process of generating my summaries. Okay, I want to now look at my summaries in a tabular display, and I'm going to do that by clicking on the summary tables icon. It looks a little bit like a filing cabinet, I also always think. When I click on there, then another floating window comes up. And there are actually 2 summary tables that have already been created, but I'm going to show you how to create your own as well. So I'll do that first of all. The little green circle icon with a white plus sign in it is always the new create a new item button. So in this instance, when I click on there, it's come up on my other computer screen, so I'll just bring it through here. Then I can decide what I want to be in my summary table. Okay, you can see that I can choose only for activated documents. I'll do that. That's the documents I've got in the background activated, and then I can choose the codes that I want. So maybe I don't want all of those subcodes. In fact, I could choose codes from other areas, whatever it is I wanted to do. I don't need to be constrained by the hierarchical groupings of my codes. I can also choose to add variables. You can see here we have put in a few variables, so we're going to be able to see the number of children that each respondent has and various other socio-demographic characteristics the variables are in this sample project. So I can just click OK. That's going to give me one column for each variable, or I could do it in one column separately. I'll show you that in a moment. For now, I'll just click OK, and it's generated this new summary table, waiting for me to name it. So I can call this work-life issues for Berlin respondents, or something like that. I can name it however I like, but let's just have a look and see what's actually happening here. I've got one row for each of the documents. Okay, so the first row is the interview transcript, the document with a respondent called Chris. So the whole of that column relates to that document, and the codes that I chose are appearing as columns, and any summaries that I created for that intersection in the previous summary table window are now displayed in this summary grid. So you can see that for that first document for Chris, the summaries haven't been created for all of the codes. But if I had have created them for all of them, then they would all be sitting in there. So now I'm able to make a comparison in this grid view of my own summaries. So I've abstracted away from the data one level by doing that. Okay. When I generated this table, if you remember, I'll just go back and start the process again. I could choose variables, and I had some in here in their own column. This time I'll just show you that if I chose a few and I put them in the top level here, then rather than having one column for each variable as we've got in the background, then what we're going to have, I'll just flick back and check my codes again, click OK. Now what I've got is all of that information in that first column, rather than having a separate column for each variable that you choose. It might actually be that you don't want the variables when you're thinking about working like this. It's completely up to you, as it is with many, well, most all really aspects of MAXQDA. You always have the flexibility to choose what you do and don't want to see in the display based on what it is that you're doing analytically with the software. So that's just to show you the difference between those two areas. Okay, what else can we do here? So I'm just going to show you one that's already been created. So this one here is focused just around one particular code. So rather than several columns for codes, we have got just one. Okay, so this is an example of focusing down that abstraction a little bit. And there's various things that we can do in here. One of them is that we can transpose the table. We can swap the rows and columns. And if I do that, then the display, the information is exactly the same. It's just that the orientation is slightly different. And the reason for showing you that is that that allows us to think slightly differently about what the unit of analysis, if you like, is that we're thinking about the summaries on the basis of. And that becomes more clear when I go back and show you the one that I created earlier, which had multiple codes. So if I flick back to that one here, we've got several codes. Now you'll see that I've got rows for the codes: education, friends and family. Here's one typical workday that's got lots of summaries. Okay, and if I want to, then I can think about focusing a document summary based on one document. So let's take an example from this document here, Selim. That's one respondent. There's a little memo icon here. If I click on there, you're going to open that up for me. It opens up the document memo for that document. Okay, remember that memos are another space where we can work, and we've got this special area in this memo where we can, drawing on the summaries that we have developed in the summary feature, is that we can then even abstract further to the document summary. So what's written here in this memo, we are writing as the researcher, but we can draw on these summaries of the individual codes related to that individual person in this instance, and summarize even more at that level. So again, a further reduction, what I call it a kind of conceptual abstraction based on your interpretation of the data. Okay, and that's really quite powerful if you're interested in a data file, a document, as it occurs in MAXQDA as a unit of analysis. Okay, so the other thing that we can do, and I'm going to show you something very similar but focused on a code, which is why turning things round can be useful. So back to swapping the rows and the columns, transposing the table, and now you'll see that the memos are sitting at the code level here rather than at the document level. And I'll just scroll across and show you this one here, typical workday. That's a code. And when I double click and open up that one, then you'll see here that that code summary hasn't yet been written. Okay, so just to show you the difference between when I opened up the document summary memo for that one document, which had some information written in here, but this is fully editable. So I could be reading down those summaries and add my, I'm just going to write in here, higher level, summary of the summaries. Okay, the nice thing about this, okay, as well as that idea of abstraction, is that whatever I write in these memos is accessible wherever I access that memo. So I'm just going to show you that by closing down all of those windows I've got open. The document memo that we looked at earlier is sitting here. And if I double click on there, you'll see that that's accessible there. So it's just that I'd opened it from a different place inside MAXQDA. But there is only one memo that is linked directly in that functional way to that one document. So wherever I open it from, all of the information is accessible there together. And the same is true for the code memo that I generated from there. There's what I just wrote in there, see? So even though I opened it up from the summary functionality, the feature for summary grids, it's accessible wherever I see that memo. And I just showed you opening it from a code, but I can also get that from the main memos area. So I've just very quickly clicked to the memos main tab at the top here. My favorite way to see all my memos is this all memos option. You could do something similar in the overview, but personally I like that one. So this is a memo manager for all my memos. I can access code memos, in-document memos, all kinds of different memos. This is not a spotlight about memos, so I'm not going to go any further, but other than just to show you that, where's the code that I was looking for? The typical workday, there it is, there is that information. So wherever I access it from, it's all there for me. Okay, so a few other things that I wanted to show you. I'll just flick back to where I was because I also just think it's really useful to know. So I've opened up the summary grid again, and I'll flick back into the summary tables, going to one which is nice and focused here. Always know that you've got these three wonderful buttons at the top right here, which allow you to export things out. Okay, there's another spotlight, I believe, all about exporting and reporting, but you see these icons in all kinds of different places in MAXQDA. I won't do it right now because there's a couple of other things within the software I want to show you. before I run out of time. But if I click on this little W icon, that will open up this table in a Word file. The same will happen into an Excel file if I click on the Excel button. So it's very easy to get these out. And it's also possible to click on this little button here. Can you see this one? This is one of my favorite buttons, in that once I'm happy with this summary table, I can turn this into a data file. So I will show you that if I click on there. Then what's happened in the background, again, I'll just close this down so that we can see, is I've now got a new document in my document system at the top level. When I double click on there, you'll see that that's actually my summaries now as a data file. So if I wanted to, I could then carry on and code my own summaries within there. And that is really a means of data reduction and then analyzing your own summaries. And related to kind of methodological approaches, I think that that's useful for all kinds of different approaches: thematic analysis, also framework analysis, which is a specific type of analytic approach, which is all about summarizing. So abstracting fairly quickly from the data and then working with and analyzing summaries. So that ability to turn those summaries into data files is really, really powerful for those sorts of approaches. The downside of doing that, of course, is that this is now lost connection. This data file has lost connection with the original underlying transcript data. But of course, I've still always got that connection from the summary feature itself. So you would need to think about the stage at which you did that if that was going to be a useful thing to do. Okay, couple of other things to say. First of all is the Summary Explorer, okay, which allows us to think about making comparisons on the group level rather than the document level. So what I've shown you up to this point has been focused on documents, whether we're displaying them in the rows or the columns. But let's imagine that I wanted to compare summaries based on a case or a group or a subset in some way. And I can do that by working with, rather than individual documents, comparing document groups or indeed document sets. For the purposes of today, I'll do that on the group level. So I'm dragging one group. Remember, in this group for Berlin are all of the transcripts from individuals who are physically located in Berlin when they were interviewed. And this is the group of those who are physically located in Hamburg, so two different locations. And then I can choose, I can individually drag and drop codes from anywhere in my coding scheme, or because I've got them activated still, I'll just quickly insert the activated documents, codes, sorry. So I'm now making a comparison, not on the individual document level, but on that group level. And you get a slightly different display here. Let's choose typical workday. That's the one that we've been looking at previously. So here what you can see is not the individual documents, which in this project are individual interview transcripts, but all of those based from that location, Berlin, and the comparison is with another location, in this example, Hamburg. And for me, that's really nice analytically to be able to compare on those different levels within your analysis. And of course, we've got those same output options there as well. So the Summary Explorer is really powerful for that higher level comparison based on groups or cases. Okay, I'm running out of time very swiftly. So just to show you the last thing, which was overviews of summaries. I mentioned in my slides that we can kind of get overviews at different levels. So I'll just show you that in a couple of ways. So first of all, I will go to a code. So what I've shown you before is to open up a memo, okay, where I can see the summary of summaries that I may have written in the memo. What I'm about to show you is something slightly different. in that when I right click on that code and I ask to get an overview of the summaries, it's going to show me all of the summaries which have been created from any of the different documents that relate to that particular code. And we can see them here. It's a bit like a code retrieval window. It's just that it's focusing on the summaries rather than the code level. And I can get something very similar by focusing in on a document as well. So if I go to a particular document, I can right click and there are various overviews. You can see that there's lots of different overviews you can get at different locations in the software. So just to kind of, oops, I just clicked on that slightly quicker than I meant to. As a kind of little tip, it's always a really good idea, I think, to right click in different places within the software, because that gives you a really nice overview of the sorts of analytic actions that you can take on that particular object. In this case, we're taking the overview of summaries for that one document, this one interview transcript. And these are all of the summaries that have so far been written, and you can see which codes they've been written about, accessible at that different level. So that's a really nice function also. So little tip along the way, right click and you'll see the different overviews that you can get. Okay, I've just right clicked on a document group here. So now when I choose summaries, I'm getting all of the summaries that have been written for any of the documents in that particular group. Okay, so that idea of levels at which you're writing and accessing those summaries later on is something quite useful to take away from the idea. You get the numeric information always in these overview windows also. Okay, so I've run out of time, so let me just flick back to my slide. My final slide, my own summary of summaries features in the software, as it were, is that they're really, really cool. I think they're really, really useful. I'm very keen on encouraging the getting out of your analytic insights out of your head into MAXQDA. As you have those thoughts, as you view and think about your data from multiple different perspectives, as you go through the process of analysis using the software, one of the really powerful uses of MAXQDA throughout the process is this idea that not only are there lots of different writing spaces, but those writing spaces are linked to the data that prompted the thoughts that you're writing. And that's incredibly powerful, because it means that your interpretations, in this example, the summaries of the data, are completely interactively linked with the data that prompted those thoughts. And that for me is really, really powerful in terms of organizing your analysis. There's many different potential methodological and practical applications for summaries, but you do need to be clear in your own process about how you're using this particular writing space slightly differently from other writing spaces that you have at your disposal in MAXQDA. As I mentioned earlier, there are lots of different writing spaces. So if you're going to use multiple writing spaces, be doing that for an analytical reason, so that you can manage that interpretive process. Okay, I think that's the end of my slides and my demonstration of the software, what I had planned to do. So I'm going to have a look at the questions. So, yeah, actually, the idea behind summary functions from a methodological point of view, the help menu is really great for that. So I definitely recommend that you look at that. There's a question here. Could you please recommend an effective and efficient way to use summaries in many cases, 150 interviews? I've noticed that it works great for a few cases, but I'm not sure how I could use it properly in a large number of interviews. Okay, so I think that's partly to do with the idea of scoping down the summary tables in the first instance. So if I just flick back to the software, you have to think, I think there's two answers to that question, or two reflections on that question. If you've got many documents, you're not going to want to generate a summary grid of all codes by all documents, because there's just going to be too many. Yeah, because you're going to have I mean, even in this sample project, there's loads and loads of different documents. So in order to make the practical side of generating summaries manageable, I would be thinking about creating the summaries on the level of different groups of documents initially. So in this example, it might be to do with different locations or some means by which you've organized the data according to document groups. And then if you activate on that level, and then maybe also be thinking about which codes it is. You know, it will depend also on which codes that you have that you want to be doing the summarization on. If that makes sense. So I do think you need to be thinking very clearly about what's the purpose, and this is the second part of my response, I guess. What's the purpose of the summaries? Okay, you can, because what you write in that summary area needs to be somehow equivalent for each summary that you write. Otherwise, you're not helping yourself analytically. So thinking through the planning of the summaries, why you're creating these summaries, what you're going to do with those summaries afterwards, that will help you focus your attention and make the process more manageable. Okay, and then practically to do that on different subsets of the data. So it could be that you initially focus on particular areas in your coding schema where there's a lot of coding going on. So you can see these numbers down here in my code system. That's telling me how many segments are linked to each of those codes across all the data files. So it could be that that informs your decision about which subsets to be focusing your attention on conceptually. But I think that would be the kind of balance between the methodological and the practical answer to that question, Claire. I don't know if that helps. I think something similar has been said in the chat as well. Oh, lots of these questions have already been answered. So there's another question. Can I also have automatically coded focus group participants in the horizontal? Okay, so this is something that I would also like as well. So at the moment, I don't know if I've got focus group respondents. Yes, I have in this project. So if I wanted to look at focus group participants, okay, in the rows or the columns, depending on whether I've transposed it or not, that's not possible at the moment, as far as I'm aware. Because when I generate the summary grids, it's always doing it on the document level, yes? And although we have these kind of focus group respondents sitting here, it's actually the document, the whole transcript, which is the basis of which the table is generated. So you can't actually do that at the moment. If I understand your question correctly, you would want to have Olga, Fatima, Andy, and Pranav in the columns, not the whole focus group. And I believe that that's not currently possible. Hopefully that will be something that will be possible in the future. I agree that that would be very useful when you've got multiple units of analysis occurring in the same data file. So this is really working at the moment, summaries based on a document being the key unit of analysis rather than parts of documents, which I think is what you're alluding to. How do I export? So another question here is that the summary shows up in the document memo, if I understand correctly, but how do I export the memos in a way that includes the summary? When I tried, the memo exports, but not the summary. You should be able to do that. I guess it depends on how you exported the summaries. Let's find how you exported the documents. Here's one. So I've got this summary here, which is not a very good summary. I think it depends on how you're exporting, probably. So that might be question for the developers in terms of getting that out in the format that you want to get it out, Matthew, if that's your question. So I'm not completely sure I know the answer to that question right now. If I'm exporting in this way, what happens if you send it to QTT? Hopefully it comes across there. I haven't checked that out recently. Here are the export options also. So if I take export memos in right window, that should give me what I want. And here you get the option for summary. So hopefully that's going to give us what we want. Let me take all of them. That would be what I would do to double check the answer to your question. Let's leave it there. That's okay. Will it open up immediately? Not sure. Might have to go and find it. Where did it come up? I'm not sure I completely saw where it's not saved it where I thought it was going to save it. This is not a very good answer to your question because I saved it and it didn't save where I thought it was saving it, so I can't quickly find it open. But that's how I would double check it, Matthew. I don't know if you can have another quick go at that. And there are two. Okay, Coca-Cola is saying the best way is to do it through the QTT and export it that way. Yeah, I think what I just demonstrated is what's in the chat, although I didn't actually open it up in Word, so apologize for that. Okay, let me have a look at another question. Okay, there's a question from Ray, which is slightly different aspects because it's to do with memos rather than summaries. But I don't mind answering that question. Your question is, when would you create a memo that's linked to a document, which is what these ones are doing here in the document system. So I could create one for Chris here, or when would you create one in this column here? This column here associated with a document is the memo column. If I double click here, Ray, then I'm creating a memo that is associated with that position in the data, okay? And that's different from creating a memo that's associated here in the document system with the whole document itself. So the kind of idea behind those two places where you can create memos is that the one here that I've currently got open is kind of about the whole of this document. So this would be where I would be making my reflections about the whole of Chris's transcript, right? Whereas this one here, oops, because I've created it associated, oops, I've just done two. I've just created two next to each other. By mistake, so I'll just delete that one and reopen the one that I had already created. This one really is because it's of where it's located, it's an in-document memo. It's not actually directly linked to anything that's coded, but it's physically kind of stuck in this place in the data. So probably what I would be writing about in this memo would be to do with this bit of data. But not necessarily to do with the codes that I'd applied to it, which is what I'd maybe doing if I was adding a comment to the coded segment. So you can hopefully see that when I open that memo up, I get different display from when I open up the document memo. So the document memo has got this document summary feature, which is what I was alluding to earlier, whereas the in document one doesn't have that, because the one that's sitting at the document system is kind of about the document in its entirety, whereas this one here is more about your reflections as you are reading through this bit of this data file, if that makes sense. Okay, according to my clock, we've come to the end of our time together. So I don't think I've answered all of the questions, so I apologise about that. But as I said earlier, you can connect with me outside of here, and I think the MAXQDA people will also respond to any questions that I have neglected to see in the Q&A. But hopefully that was useful for you all, and I look forward to seeing you in other sessions later on today and tomorrow.